Give it up for Edwin.
This is dedicated to you, people. So I lift my hand up to the skies and question the heavens, asking why must I go on to live in this violence and crime? Why can't I toil the lands I know and watch all my children's children grow? Why must I go on to live in this violence and crime? Somebody, I didn't get somebody. 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 Somebody, I didn't get. Oh gosh, a new day begins. And you're feeling down and out. Your problems ahead, don't know yet what they're about. You wish you could die, so the madness could be gone. It's nonsense to hide or run. Something says keep pressing on. A voice in my head, it talks to me. Oh, a voice in my head, it talks to me. Out with the problems, it tells me the road is long. It tells me we must be strong. Roll with the pain and the strife. Today is the start of the rest of your life. Sing it. A voice in my head, it talks to me. A voice in my head, it talks to me. Out with the problems. The wrong money, and it gets money, wrong money, and it gets money, don't money, and it gets no, don't money, and it gets money, don't money, and it gets money, don't money, and it gets easy. Oh gosh, inside of our homes, poverty still launching there. You pack up and leave, but you'll find him everywhere. Old man lottery gives you hope of reaching dreams. But that is as far as we go, casinos are too extreme. A voice in my head, it talks to me. A voice in my head, it talks to me. Out with the problems, it tells me the road is long. It tells me we must be strong. Roll with the pain and strife. Today is the start of the rest of your life. Singing. A voice in my head, it talks to me. A voice in my head, it talks to me. Oh gosh. So I lift my head up to the skies and question the heavens, asking why must I go on to live in this violence and crime? Why can't I toil the land I know and watch all my children's children grow? Why must I go on to live in this violence and crime? I didn't get it right. I didn't get it right. Put your hand in the air, wave it with me now. Wave your hand with me now. You've got to wake up and face the world. Every man, child, boy, and girl. You've got to find your purpose in life. Listen, he talked through most of my life. Though I've never seen his face, yeah. But I trust him strong. He could never be replaced, yeah. Though employment law and the white race risen high, yeah. It tells me hold on to me dreams, still find my reach for the sky. A voice in my head, it talks to me. A voice in my head, it talks to me. Out with the problems, it tells me the road is long. It tells me we must be strong. Roll with the pain and strife. Today is the start of the rest of your life. talks to me. Whoa. A voice in my head, it talks. Baby, how do you hear from me now? Oh God. So I lift my head up to the skies and question that heaven's asking why must I go on to live in this violence? Why can't I tie the lands I know and watch my children's children go? Why must I go on to live in this violence? A voice in my head, it talks, keeps walking with me. A voice in my head, it's talking, keeps walking. Oh God, it tells me the road. It tells me we must be strong. Roll with the pain and strive. Roll with the pain and strive.
Oh yes, Edwin Yearwood out of Barbados, the man who gave us Pump Me Up, in a serious mood there, the voice in my head. One of my favorites. Good evening, wherever you're joining us from, whether you're joining us from here in Guyana or you're joining us from further afield. Welcome to Politics 101 on a Saturday night. Friday night, what am I saying? Saturday night. Saturday night is tomorrow night. Let's listen to a little bit more of Edwin Yearwood while you get yourself together.
Somebody is on. Here I am, standing lost and imprisoned by the way that I see the world. An outcast, lost and alone with no vision. Oh, what a heavy load. Made mistakes, now I'm paying dearly with my life. Knowing now I've made the wrong turns. Though I knew consequences and sacrifice, I put myself to be burned. Well, will I ever learn? Forevermore I'm branded. Forevermore I'm scorned. A job could never be landed. What must I do more wrong? Oh yeah, you know my road isn't easy. The pressure builds in me breath. Society doesn't want me. I'm left to drown in my own coloring. I've made a decision to lighten my love. I've left out self-pity. I'm heading for the city. I'm back on the road. Redemption of me. Redemption of me. Redemption of me. It's a redemption of me. Oh, yeah. I'm a miss. People talk you down so much and never clean out their own backyards. Throwing stones and living in a clear glass house could make you fall very hard. But I believe now that I have done my time for the crimes which I've played a part. Lessons learned. Now I must hold up my head, be strong and follow my heart. Whoa. My night was caught by my day. Took me to hell and back. So you could call me a loser. Everyone has own and I live with that. Oh, yes, I was truly guilty. But am I really alone? No, the man who's free from sin, let it be the one to cast the first stone. I'm tired of crying inside about the wrongs I have done. Time to make a stand. My life is in my hands. Been running too long. Redemption of me. Starting all over. Redemption of me. Everyone must change. Redemption of me. Starting all over. It's a redemption of me. Everyone must change. Oh yes. Somebody. I've got to free myself. Bring these chains.
Redemption. Redemption. Redemption.
See, I'm tired of crying inside. About the frowns I have done. Time to make a stand. My love is in my eyes. Been running too long. Too long. Redemption of me.
Running all over.
Redemption of me.
Everyone must say.
Redemption of me.
Running all over.
Redemption of me.
Everyone must say.
I know what I want. Won't let my past keep me down. There is no time to be looking back. I'm like a squirrel climbing as the wolves try their best to pull me down to the path. I realize I'm already the person that I wanted to be all along. I believe as long as we lean on each other, we can never fall to the ground. No, it's not the man in the mirror, it's the man inside of me. Cause when I move from the mirror, he disappears so easily. There's something deep in my own existence I've just got to find out. Now we must search for rightful places, see what life's all about. I'm tired of crying inside about the wrongs I have done. Time to make a stand. My life is in my hands. Been running too long. Redemption of me.
Everybody could change.
Redemption of me.
Starting all over.
Redemption of me.
Everybody could change.
It's not the man in the mirror.
Starting all over.
It's the man inside of me. It's not the man in the mirror.
Starting all over.
The man inside of me.
Everybody could change.
Redemption of me.
Starting all over.
Redemption of me.
Everybody could change.
Redemption of me. Redemption of me. No, it's not the man in the mirror. It's not the man. Mirror. 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 Mirror.
Everyone could change.
The man inside of me.
Starting all over.
The man inside of
Everyone
me.
could change.
Redemption of me.
Starting all over.
Redemption of me.
Everyone could change.
Redemption of me.
Starting all over.
Redemption of me.
Everyone could change.
Redemption of me.
Starting all over.
Redemption.
Everyone could change.
I'm climbing higher.
Starting all
Higher.
over.
I'm climbing higher.
Everyone could change.
No one can stop me now.
Starting all over.
No one can stop me now.
Everyone could change.
None of you can stop me now.
Starting all over.
None of you can stop me now.
Everyone could change.
Spencer can't stop me now.
Starting all over.
None of them can touch me now.
Everyone could change.
Serenade can't touch me now.
Starting all over.
None of them can touch me now.
Everyone could change.
I'm like a class in myself.
Starting all over.
I'm a class by myself.
Everyone could change.
Redemption of me.
Starting all over.
Redemption.
Everyone could change.
I'm free.
Starting all
Free.
over.
Free.
Everyone could change.
I know I will win.
Starting all over.
I know. Keep the envy to yourself.
Everyone could change.
Redemption of me.
Starting all over.
Redemption.
Everyone.
Redemption of me, Edwin Yearwood. That's a constant theme in the existence of Black people, oppressed people all over the world. The quality of survival, and it's a quality, overcoming, survival. And Edwin Yearwood, best known for us, well, Pump It Up. Well, there he was, giving us the message before that, the man in the mirror, and then now redemption of me. Good evening and welcome to Politics 101. We're expecting Dr. Adams to join us momentarily. He is in between meetings and he's expected to join us. Good evening to all of you. Thanks for all the feedback on the programming this week. Last night we had, of course, a new panelist, Dawn Holder, and obviously you all fell in love with her and she will be coming back. She'll be coming back very often. We come on here tonight. The big news is that the PNC's Congress will be held from June 28th to the 30th. So in another month or so, that eagerly awaited Congress is going to be held next month. And so looking forward, of course, a lot of PNC members looking forward to that Congress. And of course, as is the case with Congresses, the question of leadership arises. Aubrey Norton is being challenged by Roysdale Ford, and there may be others joining the race, we don't know. As we are on the PNC, our condolences go out to the family and the colleagues of Oscar Clark, who passed away 2 days ago. Oscar Clark, one of the veterans of PNC. I remember as a boy, he was a minister of regional development, I think. And then he went on, I think he served as Home Affairs Minister at some point. He served as ambassador, I think, to Zambia. And then laterally, he served in the city council and as general secretary of the People's National Congress. I got to know Oscar quite well during the period when we were negotiating the formation of the APNU. As I've said on this program, the APNU wasn't the most popular thing in PNC circles. It was and not in WPA circles too, because these were two parties that were locked in a very vicious contestation in the 1970s and the 80s, and there obviously was a lot of bad blood between the two parties, and so there wasn't a lot of traction for the APNU in the ranks of either party. Those of us who were negotiating were kind of lonely. I remember Corbyn would come with Basil Williams. Basil Williams was one of those persons. He was there with Corbyn, and Oscar Clark was always in those meetings as general secretary. So we got to know him well. And what was amazing about that experience is that you spend your time locked in battles and you see the person on the other side as your enemy. And once you get to know people and work with them, it's amazing how those feelings tend to get tempered. Oscar was somebody that we got along with. Lance Carberry was the other person who would come with Corbyn. It was as lonely as that, eh? It was Corbyn, Basil Williams, Lance Carberry, and Oscar. There may be others who would come in from time to time, but those were the people on the PNC side who pushed for the APNU. And on the WPA side, we were led by Clive Thomas and Dr. Rupnarayan, Dr. Thomas and Dr. Rupnarayan, with Ogunse and Desmond Trotman and myself whenever I was in the country pitching in. So when you're talking about APNU, you're really talking primarily of a few people. And we had to carry our parties with us. Today, the APNU is taken for granted. Oscar Clark passing away 2 days ago. Our condolences to his family, his colleagues in the People's National Congress, and wherever he served. He can go back to the ancestors knowing fully well that his time on this earth plane was well spent. Well spent. The battle is over. And he fought the good fight. He fought the good fight. So the PNC Congress is going to be on. Aubrey Norton is going to be back here next week. I don't know which day yet. We haven't figured out yet. It could well be as early as Monday, but he's coming back. There was a lot of fallout, it seems, from his stance on street protests. A lot of pushback from the base, from his supporters, and he did say that he was exploring other forms of protest. But when you are facing an issue that people feel strongly about, they hear, and a lot of what heard was that Norton was hesitant about street protests. But he will be back here next week to clarify what he meant, and those of us who may have taken out of context would be put right. We have invited Roysdale Ford to come on and to speak about his candidacy. We are going to pursue that. Roysdale has said yes, and it's just a matter of scheduling. But not much time left before Congress. It's another 5 or 6 weeks, and it's time for Congress. Last night and the night before, we made reference to that cartoon in the Stabroek News. We saw a statement from Ipada G and a statement from the WPA. Both were carried in the papers. Today's Stabroek News carried the WPA's letter with an editorial note, which I want to share with you and want to discuss. They carried the WPA statement, but with an editorial note, and we want to read you that and then discuss it, because I was a little bit taken aback by Stabroek News' response. Little taken aback by their response. Let's see here. This is Stabroek News. Was a little bit taken aback by their response. Let's see here. There we go, I think. So the Stabroek News carried the caption, WPA appalled at racially insensitive cartoon, and it covered this statement, and then it had a comment, an editor's comment. The editor was invited to share his view. And this is what the editor said. Let me read it for you. In an invited comment, Stabroek News editor-in-chief, Anand Prasad, said it was unclear how the WPA had discerned that the image in the cartoon is precisely representative of African Guyanese, or African Guyanese only. Prasad said what was clearly evident were the themes of poverty, youth, crime, the prevalence of guns, the future of Guyana, and families under stress. And hopefully, these were the issues that readers of the newspaper will ruminate over. Prasad also defended the cartoonist's right to free speech and to represent societal maladies in the way he saw fit without stoking racial animosity. That's the Kaichon Stabrook News, sorry, responding to the WPA statement on the cartoon. Let me just remind you all, the last time we dealt with this matter was in 2011, I think, yes, when the Chronicle carried a similar an editorial with a similar message, and some of us took to the streets, and there was widespread commendation, and the editorial writer was fired, and the editor who caused the editorial to go in was disciplined also. And that was the Chronicle. In 2011, it would be under Ramutar. Now we have the Stabrook News with a cartoon with a similar message. And let me read again, because sometimes the first time you don't get it, you know? In an invited comment, Stabrook News editor-in-chief Anand Prasad said it was unclear how the WPA had discerned that the image in the cartoon is precisely representative of African Guyanese or African Guyanese only. Prasad said what was clearly evident were the themes of poverty, youth crime, the prevalence of guns, the future of Guyana, and families under stress. And hopefully these were the issues that readers of the newspaper will ruminate over. Prasad also defended the cartoon's right to free speech and to represent societal maladies in the way he saw fit, without stoking racial animosity. There's a big problem with Anand Prasad's response. First of all, he's saying he doesn't understand how the WPA can discern from the cartoon, that it was representative of Black people or representative of Black people only. Something is wrong with me, with us. Something is wrong with us. Something is wrong with us. Let's look at the cartoon. I don't think that cartoon looks like an Amerindian. I don't think the boy there looks like an Amerindian. I don't think he looks like East Indians or Portuguese or Chinese. And we are referring to the imagery. Now, Mr. Prasad is saying that the cartoon intended to deal with the themes of poverty, youth, crime, the prevalence of guns, the future of Guyana, and families under stress. I have no doubt maybe the cartoonist may intend the cartoon to address those themes. It is clear that the theme of crime is intended. That's clear to everybody else. Whether it wanted to talk about youth crime and all the other things that he speaks about, those things are not, they're not evident in the cartoon. I'm not saying that the prevalence of guns, yes, there is the young black man with a gun in his hand. So yes, guns, crime, poverty, and there's poverty there. But in a society like ours, where we have different ethnic groups contesting each other, and where we have stereotypes of each other, and where the stereotype of the African, one of the stereotypes of the African, is that he, and more she, that they're criminals. Stabrook News and editor-in-chief, and then Passat cannot not know that. They live in Guyana. They must know that the stereotype, the way in which our society is developed, that certain things have certain ethnic faces, and that crime has been given an ethnic face, not just in Guyana, but all over the world. Largely because it is the society, it is the nature, it is the state that determines what is criminal and what is not criminal. If you decide that marijuana or crack are substances that are not legal, it means that people who use those substances, who use crack or who use marijuana, that you have made them into criminals. They weren't born criminals. It is the state that determines what is a crime. And then people who engage in those activities become criminal. And so the whole notion of African people as criminals is as old as our country is. Not when the police force was created. Emancipation in 1838, the police force was created in 1839. There was no need for the police force before that because the slave master was the police, was everything. But now with slavery being abolished, all of a sudden there's no need for a police force. The police force, of course, was not to police the former slave master. If they needed a police force to police the former slave master, they would have done so a long time ago. But the rise of the police force came with emancipation. So with emancipation came the criminalization of the African in Guyana and the Caribbean. And they created this state entity to police them. And so the notion of the African as the criminal was created. And as African people move more and more into the urban areas, they're the ones who would then face the brunt of the police enforcement. Because the urban areas are usually very populated, very densely populated, and we find the rate of crime more in the urban areas. There are African people in the urban areas. And so this notion of the African as the criminal is as old as our republic. So if old as our country, long before we became a republic. So if you're going to comment on crime, whether you do it via a cartoon or an editorial, and you give the crime a black face, you are feeding into the stereotype. And Mr. Passad is saying that he doesn't understand how we came to that conclusion. It's a picture of a young black man. He's suggesting that maybe the cartoonist wasn't referring to black people only when it comes to crime. He's suggesting that in his response. Well, then why doesn't he create an image that shows all races? If all races are guilty of crime, and not just African Guyanese, if he's saying that's what they meant to convey, then why use the image of a black man? Why use the image of a black man? And Anand Prasad couldn't answer that. He tells us what's the subtext behind the cartoon. But that subtext or text of the cartoon is given a face, an ethnic face, brother. And then the bombshell. That is a reflection of freedom of speech. Now, I can't say that I'm not a believer in freedom of speech. Of course, I'm a believer in freedom of speech. But you are saying that part of freedom of speech is to shame an entire race of people, and you call that freedom of speech? And the maladies of society must be well, Brother Anand, when people like myself sit up here and talk about race, you all don't cover me with freedom of speech. You all say I'm a racist. I'm using the race card. So now here is a man writing drawing a cartoon and putting it out there, but you are defending him with freedom of speech. You know what? Stabrook News doesn't carry my letters. I'm revealing this now publicly for the first time. And this has been going on since 2020. Because I did not support the Stabrook News narrative of what happened at the 2020 election. Stabrook News stopped carrying my letters. In the last 4 years, maybe 1 or 2 letters they carried. Sometimes they don't even carry WPA press releases. How about freedom of speech there, Anand? A man disgraces an entire race and you protect him with freedom of speech. When other people try to explain what race is or defend those who were attacked, you all call them racist and ban them from your newspaper. Is that freedom of speech? So it is now normative to attack African Guyanese and defend it with freedom of speech. You know what? Let me explain some history here. When segregation was being developed in the United States of America, the Supreme Court said that if the government were to violate people's human rights, the human rights of Africans, that would be going against the Constitution. Because the 14th Amendment of the American Constitution said all races of people have equal protection before the law. So the court says the government cannot treat African Americans unequally. But they went on to say the individual can, under freedom of speech. That is why you had between 1881 and 1954 over 4,000 recorded lynchings in America because of that freedom of speech. The individual could lynch an African and not be charged by the police, not be taken before the court, because the Supreme Court said that if the individual prevents an African from eating at its lunch counter or lynch an African, he or she is protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution. That is what occurred during segregation America. And now the editor-in-chief of one of our leading newspapers is saying that a cartoonist is free to portray the maladies of the society as he sees it. And if he sees that African people are reflective mostly of the maladies in society, then so be it. He's protected by free speech. And then he puts at the end of it there, he said, represents societal maladies in the way he saw fit, without stoking racial animosity. So, there's no racial animosity to what Stabroek News thinks. That is how Stabroek News feels. And how do they know there's no racial animosity? Because they're looking out the window of Stabroek News and they're seeing black people passing their business. So they're saying, well, nobody's offended. Who determines whether people are offended? Who determines that? The Stabroek News? And then Prasad? Even if one person is offended by that cartoon, even if one person is offended by that cartoon, it's enough. People on this program are offended, but you all don't mean anything to Anand. Anand think that all you all are here, and David Hines, the racist, is revving you all up. Ben Shab, the racist, is revving you all up. And the man who portrays societal malady in racial terms in a cartoon is protected by free speech. When Ogun say, ask the army not to turn its guns, Stabroek on black people, Stabroek News did not defend his free speech. They said that he crossed the line. Double standards. As I said, Stabroek News doesn't carry my letters. I wrote a letter on Brother UC Kwayana's birthday, the most recent letter. All the other independent news agency carried it, except Stabroek News. Never saw the light of day. They can't not want anything about Guyana in their papers. I don't think so. But it's because I wrote it. Then 2 days later, Rafidev wrote saying that Guyana is responsible for the Indianization of the PPP in the minds of black people. I responded to that. The other independent news entities carried it. Stabroek News didn't carry it. And Stabroek News is now talking about freedom of speech. And someone who is well known in the public, I am well known. Everybody or most people into politics know me, so I am not I'm not an anonymous person. I am one of the leading members of a political party. I am part of the political life of the country. But Stabroek News doesn't carry my letters. And Stabroek News now talking about freedom of speech. What freedom of speech? Freedom of speech when a cartoon attacks the dignity of an entire group of people. I think what has happened in Guyana is that anti-black racism has become normative. And that's very dangerous. What it means is that the society at the highest level is not sensitive to the feeling of black people. If you were sensitive to the feeling of black people, that will, if somebody brings before me a cartoon with an Indian with a gun in his hand terrorizing, I would say, get that thing from in front of me. Because I am sensitive to the issue of racial feelings. But clearly, the cartoonist, the editor of that day, the editor-in-chief over there at Stabrook News, they are not sensitive to the feelings of black people. Whether you think black people are right to make noise over a cartoon that depicts them as criminal, whether you think so or not, even if one black person is offended, that is enough for you to say, this is not going in my papers. But the insensitivity is so palpable. The middle class in this country never like to talk about race. They feel that if they sweep it under the carpet, it will go away. And they're of the view that ordinary people don't bother about race. They go about their business. They don't bother about race until the politicians use race. But the politicians, if the politicians raise race and people respond to it, it means that the people are on the same page with the politicians. The politicians have to have people. And so this nonsense of not being serious about race has now made anti-black racism so normative. You know, somebody discriminates against black people and then say, but what have I done wrong? What have I done wrong? I have black friends. In the case of Stabrook News, they will say, it's the black man that wrote the cartoon. They will say, look how many black people we have working here. We obviously can't be racist. Yes, if you were measuring racism by the number of black employees you have, or by who drew the cartoon, or by how many black friends you have, then of course you wouldn't be a racist. But racism is not defined by how many black friends you don't have, or how many black employees you don't have. Racism is determined by the use of your power to give the negative tendencies in society a color, a skin color. That's what racism is. We have the malady. Crime is a malady. Youth crime is a malady. But your imagery is the imagery of black people. So you are saying that black people generally are the manifestation of this crime. You didn't put 3 boys, a black boy with a gun, an Indian boy with a gun, and an Amerindian boy with a gun. I would not be quarreling with you in the same way I'm quarreling with you. If you had 3 boys there, a black boy, East Indian boy and thing, in that sense you're saying crime cuts across race. But you use the image of one boy, a little black boy. And then you defend it by saying, how did you come at that? I want to talk about, the cartoon wanted to talk about crime. How you jump to race, WP? How do you jump to race, Itpadaji? I didn't see the PNC press conference today. Obviously, a lot of it has to do with Congress. I don't know if the issue came up. Maybe the journalists didn't see it important to raise it, and maybe the PNC didn't see it important to raise it. So I don't know whether it was raised. But when you see, so far, only the WPA and Itpadaji have come out. There are 78 black organizations. Well, Itpadaji speak, I assume, for all 78 of them. But on these issues, if we are confined just to a few of us, then the editor-in-chief is able to do what he did there, because he's saying, I cannot understand, WPA is out left field there. And that is what we mean when we say that African people, by remaining quiet, they are playing into this view that all is well. All is well. I have had to confront serious academics who argue that slavery was good for black people. In fact, they're trying to get those books into the schools in Florida. That slavery was good for black people. I have had that. I've heard students with it. How do we know that? Because black people have moved on. So when we do not push back against the advantage that is being taken on our people, then those who take the advantage assume that our people don't believe it's advantage taken. As I said, this thing was done by the Chronicle under Ramatar time. And I remember Mark Benshop and Lincoln Lewis, myself, I think Norris Witter was there, and young Ram Sarup. And we kept that matter on the streets and sensitized people. We burned a whole heap of Stabrook News, Skychor News, Chronicle, on the Square of the Revolution. And we forced the government of the day to take action. The lady who wrote it was fired. And the editor who gave the permission was disciplined. Skychor News is saying, well, they have done nothing wrong. And so there's no need to discipline anyone. The WPA and others are making heavyweight out of nothing. And I am saying you can only do that if you have bought into the notion of anti-black racism, that anti-black racism is normal. If black people are discriminated against, that's not discrimination. That's normative. They are not equal to the rest of us. So it's not discrimination. The treatment that they're getting is in keeping with their social status. This is what these people are saying. The cartoonists didn't use an Indian boy. Why? The cartoonists didn't use an Amerindian or Portuguese or Chinese boy. Why? Why? Why an African boy? Anand Prasad has not answered that. But he's saying that's the way the cartoonists see it, and the cartoonist must be defended. It is his right to free speech. Where does free speech end and racism against another group of people begin? I would like Mr. Anand Prasad to tell me that. And in my study of ethnic violence across time and across the world, it shows that there are three things that ethnic groups respond most stridently to. One is the threat of dispossession. When you're dispossessing them of land, when you're dispossessing people of concrete things, land in particular land. It has been shown that ethnic groups respond very, very stridently to that. The second thing is they respond to disenfranchisement. Is their vote worth anything? When they vote, is their vote counted properly? Is it a waste of time going to election? When groups feel disenfranchised, it leads to trouble. We in Guyana have had our problems with that. Some people stress that the 1960s violence and external interference. Yes, there was external interference. There was external interference. There's interference by the British and the Americans. Nobody can doubt that. But that alone did not bring down the PPP. It was the opposition response to the PPP's policies. Not 1 cent more in the budget, the Calder budget. There was preference on the PPP government for agriculture rather than spending money on the public service. And public servants responded to that as workers. And African people were fearful of going to independence under the PPP. They had seen what the PPP had done in office from 57. And so it was a combination of the workers' problem with the government, the racial, the threat of disenfranchisement by Africans, and external forces. So that threat of disenfranchisement is a very big cause of ethnic conflict. Part of what's happening in Gaza is the disenfranchisement of the Palestinians. It is a dispossession. Land is taken away from them. All the settlers are going in. And finally, groups respond to what is called the dishonor of the group. When you are going to put a cartoon like that in the papers, you're dishonoring an entire group, whether they say it or not. And it is those three things, dispossession, disenfranchisement, and dishonor, that drive ethnic conflict around the world. And when you look at what is being done to Black people, look at the dispossession, the taking away of land from them in the name of quote-unquote development, kicking down their homes. Mackenzie, Hillfoot, Moko, in front of the hospital, the seawall, and now they're at Success. There is a clear policy of dispossession of land in particular. Disenfranchisement. The votes were not honestly counted. The PPP has their version. They say they know the votes are not honestly counted because of SOPs. And the coalition said, we know it was not honestly counted because the boxes were opened and the evidence was in the box. There's no surmising. The boxes were opened. GCOM has records of these open boxes and what were found. And that threat of disenfranchisement. If Indian people felt that they were disenfranchised by the Mingo sheet and the lack of SOPs, the court ruled in their favor, and they're in government. So that is why they talk about attempted rigging. But the coalition supporters are not talking about attempted rigging, they're talking about actual rigging. The court ignored them. The petitions never got heard. GCOM ignored them. So the supporters of the coalition, who are mostly Black people, feel disenfranchised. They have a reason to feel, because the PPP's accusation, the court give them, as we say in Guyana, satisfaction. GCOM give them satisfaction. But when the Africans opened, when the boxes were open and opposition supporters who were mostly Africans say, here is our evidence, the court turned its back, GCOM turned its back. So black people have a right to feel disenfranchised again. And now the constant dishonor to the group, the shooting of them like dogs, spitting on their women, kneeling down on their women, portraying their young men as criminals. The honor, the dignity of the group is being attacked. I'm saying that our country has become a sitting duck for ethnic conflict. That we have not had ethnic conflict now, a lot of experts will say it's a minor miracle because all the ingredients are there. The dishonor, the disenfranchisement, the dispossession of land and other forms of material wealth. So our country is just ticking away anytime. And we have a government, instead of trying to find ways and means of tempering, of removing the causes of the conflict, it is piling it on. You mean if the teachers ask for 20%, you mean you're not even going to go to the table and say, all right, we ain't got money, or we ain't got enough money, we're going to give you 15. Not even that. We're going to give you 10. Not even that. While the workers of another ethnic group, they went out with their placards in one day, and by the next day they were off, they got what they got. They got what was owed to them. So black people, for all intents and purposes, as far as the government is concerned, they don't matter. Look at what they've done to the institutions that are predominated by Africans. Look at what they've done to the public service. Look at what they've done to the army. Look at the leadership of the army and the police. While the membership is made up of Africans, the leadership is made up more and more of non-Africans. And we have a military culture where commands are taken by the civilian authority. The leadership of the armed forces take their commands from the civilian authority. And the ranks take their commands from the leadership of the military. Now, if the military leadership is handpicked by the government, by the PPP government, it means that the leadership of the army are taking commands from a civilian leadership, and that's okay. But if they are sponsored in their position by the civilian leadership, then it is not just taking commands from the leadership of the state. They're taking, in many regards, partisan commands. And then the fellowship, so the PPP has worked out of to control the army. The recommendations is that Indian people should join the army. Indian people have chosen not to join the army. So what's the PPP's next move? Then control the top of the army. So the institutions that are dominated by black people, the public servants, public service, the military. Those institutions have been weakened and they're now controlled. Nobody talks about it. But Burnham's union, Critchlow Union, the Guyana Labor Union is now a PPP union. Because the leader of that union switched to the PPP. And a union which used to have Burnham and Hoyt as its general president and Critchlow is now a PPP union. So they've weakened black institutions that are controlled by black people. And so the life of African people in Ghana is a living hell. And the newspapers are not helping because they are not being straight when it comes to race. This is one of the most racially divided countries. But at the level of its leadership, whether it's civil society leadership, political party leadership, they all ignore race and they treat it treat it flippantly. And so when you have a cartoon like this, it is dismissed. Oh, that's not what we meant. Ours is a colorblind society. So when you see a black man with a gun, it doesn't mean a black man. It means all Guyanese. That's the nonsense they will tell us. And we, the ordinary black people, have to find a way to break out of that because we are going to be devoured in this country. One of the easiest way to devour people is to make people believe that the wrong that is done to them is right and that they deserve it. And you hear that with some black people. You hear that with some black people. I saw one or two on here, obviously they're PPP people. Maybe they're not black people, but they use black names. Saying that when black people commit crime, we have to admit that. Well, all races commit crime. All races commit crime. Some of the crimes that used to be given a black face in the old days now. You drive down the streets of Georgetown at 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and the big vehicles with the nasty music and driving at 100 miles per hour and all that kind of thing in crowded street. Look good. Long time it used to be them little black boy. No longer so. Yet, Stabrook News insists on carrying a cartoon that depicts crime in our country with a black face. We can't remain quiet on those things. We cannot. Whatever happened with us, we came out of slavery with our dignity intact. And we are selling our dignity. But more than that, our leadership is not defending black dignity. Look, it's something. Don't matter what you say to political leaders in the opposition. No matter how you bawl in their ears, they come back with the same message. They talk for a minute about black suffering, and then they're gone on. And the PNC, the PPP, the PPP supporters are suffering too. And if you're going this way, you will see this, and you will see that. They're quick like to, and they will get 0 of those votes. They will get 0 of those votes. And the place where the vote is coming from, they don't spend time analyzing their problem. I think Indian people have issues in this country. There are issues of discrimination against Indian people. And they have to be addressed. But you can't address it in the same breath you're addressing Amerindian suffering and African suffering, because each group experienced that suffering differently. The Indian worker knows that the government will bargain with his union. The Indian worker, the African worker, knows that the government will not bargain with their union. So the possibility of higher wages for the poor is a higher possibility among unionized Indian workers because their unions are being engaged by the government. Black people unions are not being engaged. So when you all talk this story, I want to bounce people's head, because I'm saying you cannot, if you could do it in the past and get away with it. It's difficult today because it's in your face. Sugar workers come out on the streets today. They cry. The government hears their cry and wipe their tears. Black people, black teachers come on the street for the last 3 months. Instead of wiping their tears, the government is causing more tears. And big analysts and political leaders sit down there and talk about the two suffering as the same. Nonsense. And I don't want to say we are politically dunce. But if we are not politically dunce, then we are insensitive to the cries of our own people. The suffering is different, qualitatively different. The Indian worker, his or her union is being bargained with, and their wages are forthcoming. The African worker, their unions are not being bargained with, and so their wages are not forthcoming. Their wages are low. And yet, we sit around and we talk about the thing in the same breath. It's different. It's different. And our leaders have to get to that point. I maintain that 75% of the advantage that is being taken on black people is because the government has concluded that the leaders are compromising them. Jack Dio was making fun yesterday. Sisters and brothers, we are at an important point in our history. And African people have to take a stand, with or without your leaders. Because we may well win an election if we are able to get voters list, biometrics, and a level playing field. We may well win an election, but we will find after winning the election, we can't govern. Because the economy, the levers of the economy, the commanding heights of the economy, as we used to say in the old days, are controlled by one or two ethnic groups that are not supporters of any government on our side. The dispossession of the African is in full flight. The disenfranchisement of the African is in full flight. And the dishonoring of the black man and woman is in full flight. Spitting on people is one of the worst forms of dishonor. Killing our young people like dogs is the epitome of dishonor. Kneeling down on the chest of our women. Watching their homes being broken down and nothing can be done. Those women at Moko, they tried to stop the bulldozers. They made an effort on their own. But they couldn't do it on their own. They could not do it on their own. It is the first time in recent times that there is no balance of forces in Guyana. The African side used to be fearful that if you push too hard, the Indians would hold their money, they would hold their products and don't bring it to the market. They will come to the market, sell, make back just as much as they spend, and then throw away the rest. All of that happened at some point. And the Indians, in turn, were fearful that, look, the army and police are controlled by black people. So there were checks and balances that caused the two groups not to cross the border. Even though Burnham was in charge of an authoritarian government, he knew the limits to go with Indian people. But this government do not know the limit when it comes to black people. They overstep their boundaries, they shove their finger in our eyes, and they get away with it every day. We make a little noise, and life is back to normal. It has to stop. It has to stop. No government should be given such a blank check. When government was created, civil society was automatically created. And so there is what is called civil society, is that space in which people are able to organize outside of government. People talk about civil society, they talk about civil society organizations. Civil society organization is just one manifestation of civil society. The notion of civil society is the political space in which citizens organize outside of government. And at the center of that space outside the government is the right to protest. Not to protest, to deny people in outside of government. The right to protest is like denying a farmer his tools to do his work on the farm. The government has their tool. They have the army, they have the police, they have the state entities. Black people, the opposition, they have to have their tools in place. And the government has been busy taking away those tools, blunting them, and in many regards, our leaders on our side aren't allowing it to go. And I feel strongly about this issue. Never have I, in all my long time around politics, seen a people so helpless. So helpless. Two people called in the other morning. I was on Kidaki show. And they basically are saying to me, when we voted for the coalition, we voted for the WPA. And we are looking to you all for leadership. When people are pushed in that position, something is radically wrong. We in the WPA are not interested in splitting the opposition. We are not interested in splitting the opposition. But we cannot sit by and allow this advantage to be taken on African people and dismiss it as political, collateral damage. Because that is basically what you're saying. Collateral damage. I remember the PPP leader saying to me during the jailbreak story, they don't mind some Indian people dying because they're going to be able to use that to say to Indian people, look what black people do to you all. So they were prepared to make Indian people collateral damage. I am not playing that collateral damage game. That we have to sacrifice some of our young men and our young women being brutalized and terrorized so that we can get some crossover vote to win an election. Oh no, oh no. Yes to crossover vote. Yes to winning an election. No to the abuse of African people. No to the disenfranchisement of African people. No to the dishonor of African people. No to the dispossession of African people. Those things are not negotiable. No amount of crossover vote is worth those three things: our possession, our honor, and our franchise. And we have to get up and get. We have to get up and get. Because it's not looking nice. Stabrook News, which is not part of the government, if Stabrook News can carry a cartoon like that and defend it, it tells we where black people is in this country. Is the government? Is sections of civil society who are prepared to kick us under the bus? Kick us out of the dance. All we are worth is ticket for gun sport. All we are worth is the big party. I'm not saying we are not worth partying, but more than that, we are worth more than that. Tomorrow night, we are going to launch our new program, Music as Political Expression, Reggae and Calypso 101, tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, 7 p.m. tomorrow night. I know 6 o'clock is the show over on 107.1. That show starts at 6 o'clock. And so we're going to be rolling from 7 o'clock. We're going to be rolling from 7 o'clock. So the weekend lineup is 7 o'clock tomorrow night, Music as Political Discourse, Political Expression, and then on Sunday night, West Indies Cricket 101. So that's our lineup for the weekend. And then next week, we're going to have the opposition leader, Aubrey Norton, coming back. Dr. Jeffrey is going to be on next week. We're going to have a big lineup. Coretta Scott is going to be here. Coretta McDonald is going to be here next week. So we have a full weekend schedule. And so I'll be seeing you all on the weekend. But please, I'm asking you all, don't sit down and let this advantage continue. If you normalize it today, then it's going to be more difficult to get rid of it, even when you have government. It has to be tackled now. Good night. I know the bookers are there in Guyana to do the final rites to their mother on Monday. Our prayers are with them. As I said, our prayers are also with the family of Oscar Clark, former General Secretary of the PNC, a good man, a good man. Our condolences to his family and to his party. May their soul rest in perfect peace, perfect peace. you.